Thank you very much for this nice introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here and talk about stablecoins, CBDCs, and real-world assets. So my name is Matthias, and as I said, I'm from the Center for Crypto Economics, which is a part of Swiss economics. So how am I going to structure this talk? So first, to give you a brief motivation. Then I give you a little bit an introduction of today's and tomorrow's payment methods. Basically, these are stablecoins, CBDCs, and we discussed later as well tokenized real-world assets. Then I will basically bring that together, discuss a little bit the interactions between those different asset types, and also give some outlook for further, like beyond tomorrow, basically. Okay, let's start with the motivation. What's the motivation? Well, we have seen an immense growth on the one hand of stablecoins, which have been here now for several years, and have been grown to about 100 billion in value, dollar. Then what we also have, but as you can see here on the right, basically what we also have, there have also been crashes of stablecoins. So maybe discussing a little bit what are their how secure are they, how stable they are. So there are a lot of good discussions about that as well. Then next, after stablecoins, we have CBDCs. We had a lot of talks, I think also previous year, about the CBDCs. They're expected to be launched. Somehow they cover something similar than stablecoins. So how does that relate together? And recently, as we also heard today, is the topic of tokenization of real-world assets. I think we had the talk previously about tokenized shares of SMEs, such as Aktionariat. But we also have, and also in addition, a huge market of tokenized treasury bills. And as you see here on the right, practically the same picture as seen before, basically a huge increase in TVL of them. And recently, like 1 week ago, BlackRock, one of the biggest financial players, just announced a tokenized fund, basically this institutional digital liquidity fund. So we also see traditional players coming into this sector. So from that perspective, basically, I want to first discuss a little bit about payments, about what are stablecoins, then come to look at how they relate to CBDCs and to real-world assets, and in the end conclude with what might the future hold for payments. So before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about why to pay and hold cash at the beginning. From portfolio theory, we portfolio theory tells us that if you want to invest your wealth, then you have to diversify. This theory basically says that there is a market portfolio, and you cannot, there is no better option than the market portfolio in terms of return and risk. So you cannot outperform the market portfolio in the long run, having a better return risk ratio. So this is basically this M, what you see here. So the D and the C, these are single assets, they have a worse risk-return ratio, basically. However, what you can do is you can combine this market portfolio with a risk-free asset, what you see here at the bottom, RF. And using the market portfolio and the risk-free asset, you can basically, or anyone can basically allocate his wealth to his risk preferences. So if somebody wants to take more risk, he can leverage and go to the point B with high risk and more return, or go to A with low risk and low return, or if somebody is very risk aware, he can also allocate all his funds to the risk-free asset RF. So basically this is assumed to have no risk. Now let's introduce cash. Cash is also risk-free. But the risk-free asset gives some return. Cash does not give return. So why to hold cash? Because this difference is basically the cost of holding cash, difference between risk-free asset and cash. So, you have these opportunity costs, basically. So what are the reasons for cash? Well, on the one hand, liquidity costs. Cash is the most liquid asset you have. You can trade it everywhere. It's also enforced by law. There are different reasons. You can exchange it everywhere. It's used as a medium of exchange. So it's very liquid, which is the risk-free asset is less liquid, most often. And another reason is transaction costs, basically the need to rebalance your portfolio. So you invested, you have made a decision, your risk-return assignment basically, you invested in a portfolio, now you want to buy something. What would happen? You would need to sell part of your portfolio A, send the cash to the person B. B, who receives it, has to again increase the optimal portfolio B. Because you always have transaction costs, maybe it's better to have a reserve of cash instead of always changing your portfolio at each timing point you do some transactions or buy goods. So basically, due to liquidity and transaction cost considerations, people hold a cash reserve. Okay, so the next, we go to the stablecoins. Stablecoins, they can be used as a means of a payment like cash. So what are stablecoins? First, that's very important. So stablecoins, they track the price of another asset using different collateral sources and different collateral management techniques. So they represent something else, and for having value, they need some collateral. They need something in their basket behind it, such that they can do that. There are different ways to do it, as I've shown you here. They have different advantages and disadvantages. I think the most important here is that there needs to be a collateral. There are more decentralized techniques like DAI and synthetics. They are more secure against bank runs, but they come at a cost for a higher. They need a higher collateralization ratio. They need an over-collateralization. So the value of their collateral is higher than the value of the combined stablecoins, so to say. So you see. And also, what's very important here, there are many different types, many different stablecoins in the world. So what is really important here is the second point. I mentioned the first point already. They represent something else. They're not the original. The second point, basically, that stablecoins are flexible assets that can be built by anyone. There is competition among stablecoins. So we have a lot of stablecoin types. The one who is most demanded will win the race, basically. There are different types, so maybe it's not one stablecoin that wins the race, but multiple stablecoins that win the race, because they have different characteristics. As I said, for example, DAI is very secure in that sense, and is decentralized. Maybe there are other people who want that in comparison to maybe Tether or other stablecoins that have other advantages. And what is also important to consider, that stablecoins can be quickly adjusted. Basically, that stablecoins can respond to changes in the competitive landscapes. So let's have a look at the Tether example. I used Tether here because it's the most easy to explain, but it's similar arguments holds also for DAI or Terra or synthetics. So what you have basically, as I said, you have like the collateral that is used to give the stablecoin the value. In this example, we have like 10 USD, or this is like Tether works, just the numbers are not real. It's just examples. We have like, for example, the collateral that is used to mint 100 stablecoins is $10 US in a bank account and $90 US in government bonds, basically. So this ratio is more or less, basically that's how they invest the collateral basically. So they do not hold everything, Tether doesn't hold everything in cash or in bank account, but cash or deposit money as well, but also in risk-free assets. So these treasury bills that are shown here, this is basically the risk-free asset that Tether invests the money it receives. Because these 100 stablecoins that are minted, they are provided to the users who can then either conduct transactions or also so invest in conduct transactions to exchange against other assets or buy goods and services. So they receive the stablecoins, but they provide the cash, which is then invested by Tether, basically, as I said. So what's interesting here is to say that is to see that basically, when we've shown before, the opportunity costs, inclusive all risk, they go to the users. Both basically the users, they pay in cash, but they don't get anything in return for that. On the other hand, the interest payments from these treasury bills, because this risk-free asset has some interest, they go to Tether. And that's basically what we also see. Like Tether reported a record-breaking 2.85 billion profits last quarter. So Tether made huge profits because interest rates increased. So it could gain a lot from the treasury bills, and it kept it in for himself, basically. So it's not added to the collateral. That's very important, or most of it. So now let's introduce the CBDCs. So the CBDCs are kind of similar. What we also have here is a collateral. So usually central banks, they also have a collateral for their money that they issue. Often that is also treasury bills. We have gold, we have foreign currencies, we have bank claims. So they give money to banks, so you know that maybe also. Basically these are claims. So they also have some sort of collateral. And on the other hand, banks then have cash, or it's very simplified, it's a little bit more complex, but have cash, and CBDCs is just a new form. So that is added to that right side. Again, what happens with CBDCs? So these CBDCs are then distributed to either banks or users, depending a little bit on the form of the CBDCs. If we look at here, how is this distributed? On the one hand, we have just opportunity cost. This is inflation that many people claim about. So this is on the user side. The profits are usually held in reserve. Some are also paid out, like in Switzerland, the cantons get some of the profits, but most of it is basically held in reserve. Okay, now look, let's add the stablecoins to the equation. And as you can see, or what is important here is now that basically the collateral of the stablecoins is somehow interconnected to the central bank. So the stablecoins represent basically the money from the central bank. That means anything that goes to the users must come somehow from the central bank in the beginning. So it's a way longer journey, the red line, than the green line. So there are way more risks associated with a stablecoin than with a CBDC. And that's simply the case because the stablecoin just represents basically cash, whereas the CBDC is more or less cash, digital cash. So important to note here, CBDCs are basically the original, the stablecoins are the copy. However, there are some advantages of stablecoins. I'm not going to tell you that stablecoins are going to diminish because CBDCs are very standardized assets and created by central banks. So that means we have no competition, at least within a currency. There is maybe between currency competition, but let's keep it aside. Within a currency, for the US dollar, if US would issue a CBDC, there would not be a second CBDC. So there is no competition around it. So it takes longer to adapt to changes in the competitive environment. And secondly, because it's issued by an institution, it takes much longer to react to outside, to the environment. So as you can see, we have stablecoins for many years, CBDCs, we are thinking about it, or governments are thinking about this to launch CBDCs, but there is not yet a stablecoin, CBDC that there are pilots, but not as a mass product launched yet. So there is, these are two distinct things basically, but have some main goals, namely payments. So let's talk a little bit about other payment forms. So what we've seen since then, because the drawback of the current stablecoins, or basically, for example, Tether, is that they also have this negative effect of the opportunity cost, so they don't provide a return when you hold them. So, and with the increasing inflation, a new form of payment tokens arise. So these are, for example, flat coins, or they are so-called flat coins. So their value is basically pegged not to the US dollar or to another currency. Their value is pegged to the cost of living. So in the sense of when the living costs rise, their value will also increase. So there are two examples. The largest examples I know is Frax price index. So how they do it is basically the treasury, so who manages the collateral, invests it, and is able, with the returns of these investments, is able to basically increase the value of the stablecoin or of the flat coin. Then there are other examples. So Frax is more like DAI not DAI, sorry, it's more like Tether in the sense of that it's centralized, centrally managed, but it's still on the blockchain. So yeah. But then the other example is Nuon, which is more like DAI. This is basically decentralized and decentralized, managed using exogenous assets. And here how it works, so these kind of stablecoins, they work like that individuals can create these stablecoins, but they have to provide the collateral and manage it. And if they do not manage the collateral and the collateral value decreases, they will be liquidated. It's like a penalty for them. So they have an incentive to ensure that their collateral is sufficiently large. And they do it basically by enforcing or creating incentives to increase the collateral for the individuals. And if people do not follow this rule, then they will be liquidated. So both these, just to mention, these flat coins, they exist, but they don't they are not used very, very much by the community yet. I don't know what the future looks like. Then what we also have is tokenized deposits. Basically, that are deposits. So they represent traditional bank deposits on a blockchain. So this is basically, so there are different systems. I just go to the second system, which I think is more practical. What they do is they use the deposits as a collateral and then create stablecoins from that. The benefit from this system is basically that you can use the old, or this can apply to the old system, so that people can trade with this stablecoin, but the settlement is still made by the banks. Here, the thought is using CBDCs in the future. In this case, also the users, they receive some return on their deposits, so they don't lose value, basically, or have this, or less for these costs of holding cash, because they receive interests on their deposits. Maybe the interest is too low, but that's another question. So let's move on to tokenized real-world assets, and I will bring here the example of a set for this BlackRock example of this fund that has recently been launched and attracted, I think, about more than $200-300 million dollars in the first days. So it's a very successful launch. And how it works, you see it works very similar than Tether. On the one hand, we have the collateral, which is now tokenized. So the collateral also includes cash in bank account and risk-free assets like treasury bills. There are also other instruments there, I'm not going to mention, it's not complete, but for simplicity. And what you get then is a fraction of this tokenized asset. So in that sense, 100 biddle, they call it biddle, this is their token. And one biddle is also worth exactly $1. So it's also kind of a stable coin. But now what here is interesting, we still have the opportunities costs on this $1, but interesting, and what's the difference between Tether is basically that the interest payments, they are going now to the users because it's tokenized. Basically the collateral is tokenized and not, so it's clear that the interest payments also goes to the users. So it was a very nice move from BlackRock because in the end, this is kind of a stable coin that pays out a dividend. Or an interest. The question is whether they, or a little bit difficult is with the $1, whether that works or not. But as you can see here, they made a step forward and provided interests to the users, so which gives them an advantage against CBDCs, because CBDCs will never, or not in the close future, will give you any interest. It's worth noting that it's only open, as far as I know, to institutionals up to now, but there might be in the future also, or flat coins, deposit coins, something similar that gives rewards or interests to users. And yeah, this token, this BIDL token, as I said, it's kind of closed form. It's on Ethereum, but you can only send it to pre-approved investors. So basically, it's in that sense closed. So you need to be a pre-approved investor to be able to redeem it. Okay, then as I already talked to you a little bit about interactions, more on that. So basically, we have these CBDCs. We have this one note just to the real-world assets. A stablecoin in the end is also a real-world asset, because if you tokenize a dollar, then and just have the dollar in as a collateral, then this is basically the same. This is a tokenized real-world asset, but depends on what you tokenize and how and whether the payments are also, or the interest also flow to one who holds the token. So we see basically there are multiple interactions. So we see that tangible assets or real-world assets, they require stable coins for payments of dividends and coupons. So there must be some interactions between these real-world assets and stable coins and CBDCs. Then what we also have is that, as I said previously, that stable coins and CBDCs, in particular centralized stable coins and CBDCs, are in some competition with each other. And lastly, also that the tokenization of tangible assets increases the liquidity and decreases the need for cash. So if it's easier to trade with tokenized asset, with, for example, a treasury bill, then maybe I don't need to just convert it first to cash. Maybe I just can use the tokenized asset to conduct trades. So how's the future of stablecoins in a tokenized world look like? That's my personal view on it. So I assume these CBDCs will come because they're also in competition between the countries. They might be not on public blockchains, but there will be for certain some derivatives of it, also stablecoins like. Then the stablecoins, they will remain, particularly because they can innovate. And innovation will lead to new forms. I assume that these new forms will provide some interest, basically, to the users to compensate for the opportunity costs. And as I said before, we might see risk-free real-world assets, such as treasury bills, to be used as means of payments. What beyond? So this is maybe something in 10 years we can look at, 5 to 10 years. What is beyond? What if the technology can increase liquidity and decrease transaction costs even more? Why to pay with cash at all? As I discussed before, why do we need some kind of cash if we can use the risk-free asset? Maybe even more, if we look at the example of the portfolio in the beginning, why do you have to first convert basically convert my portfolio A or part of my portfolio A to cash, and then the other person has to convert the cash he received back to the portfolio? Maybe in the future, in the far future, we will see some automatic conversions so that we basically just allocate our wealth to our optimal portfolio, and when we buy something, goods on the market, it basically will automatically conduct the payment and reallocate the assets so that it's the trade is then in the portfolio of B. So we don't need this intermediary form, but this is some kind of very far future. I think what is the point here is that I assume that the direct transfer of assets, real-world assets, will become more important in the future, also as means of a payment.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was it. Thank you very much, Matthias Hafner. Once again, put your hands together, please.